Identify yourself. I'm dying. Help me. Yeah, boy. Ah ha ha! Nice.
Let's do this.
You picked the wrong house, fool! Finish him!
What is up guys, today for this hero guide we are taking a look at Bossk himself. And we're going to be talking his star cards, we're going to be talking his strengths, his weaknesses, and also I'm going to be showcasing some gameplay in heroes versus villains, and also in Galactic Assault, just to show you guys like how to play Bossk in these specific game modes, as heroes versus villains is 4v4, Galactic Assault is 20v20. So some star cards, obviously you guys may agree and disagree with some of the ones that I run, and that's perfectly fine. Everyone has a different play style to me, and that's perfectly fine. At the same time, I just want to showcase like how I would play Bossk in the hope to kind of help new players so that they can actually master Bossk and hopefully, you know, rack up some kills, and also to just stay alive, especially when it comes to getting really good kill streaks, as Bossk is one of those characters that can do so. So jumping straight into Bossk's star cards, Bossk, really fun character to play, and in my personal opinion he's got so many star cards that actually benefit him in a lot of ways. You can run star cards that actually help his Deoxys grenades, you can actually run star cards that actually benefit his mines. But as you guys can see, these are the 3 star cards that I use, and I'm going to be explaining them in a different clip as well to showcase why I use these star cards compared to the other ones that Bossk has as well, in hope to help out you guys and understand it. So the first star card that I use is called Multi-Traps, and the reason why I use this star card is because it actually allows Bossk to gain 2 additional proximity mines and also increases the blast radius of the actual mines, as it increases the blast radius by 25%. In more cases than some, it's actually really good to run this star card, as it actually allows Bossk to have a larger increased radius to his mines. And in a lot of situations, whenever you're playing as Bossk, being a blaster character, especially when you're playing as heroes versus villains as an example, you're a target. Most saber wielders, they will come for you, they will try to pick you off as soon as possible. So one thing I'd always recommend, especially when playing Bossk as well, when you're putting down these mines, make sure they're in an area that can actually benefit you. A lot of new players, especially like what I've been seeing do today, they would put these mines down and then they would just like randomly just disappear from where the mines are and just leave themselves completely wide open. However, if you're playing heroes versus villains like I'm doing right now as an example, and let's just say enemies are trying to like come after you because they're all clustered up, I'd highly recommend putting these mines down and then actually trying to stay within the radius of the mines, because more times than some, because you're a blaster character, you can actually shoot your enemies from afar. However, if you're playing against a saber wielder, they're going to have no other choice but to actually come up towards you to try to get rid of you as fast as they can as well. So in more situations, I highly recommend staying within your mines. Try to make sure that you can actually get your mines in a good place so that when enemies actually come towards you, whether you're rolling in and out of your mines, more times than some, you're actually going to be doing really good damage to your opponents as well. So this star card, like I mentioned, is really good and really helpful as well in order to kind of maximize your potential of having your proximity mines. And the second star card that I use is called Predator Resilience, and the benefits of this star card is it actually allows Bossk to get a 20% damage reduction when using his middle ability, which is called Predator Instincts. Benefits, like I mentioned, 20% damage reduction, and this is really good for Bossk, as Bossk, being a blaster character, he's not really the tankiest. He doesn't really take much hits. However, when running the star card, it actually allows him to get damage reduction, and in this game, having damage reduction is really good. In most scenarios, whenever you're playing as Bossk, as I play Bossk more in an aggressive way, I like to use his middle ability, as it actually allows Bossk to shoot out micro grenades with this ability. So I like to push up my objective, and I actually like to make sure that I I have this ability out mostly at all times, get that damage reduction, because when using this ability, my aim is to always clear out as much enemies as I possibly can. If I'm playing on Galactic Assault, I'm always going to be looking to try to find where enemies are, and I'm always going to be trying to get up into their faces and try to like get the kills for them, so that I can either push for an objective and help my team out, or if I'm trying to defend one, then I can use these grenades to then manage the area of the effect I'm trying to clear and everything. So in most cases, like I'd highly recommend, especially for newer players as well, because sometimes I do see this, new players, especially when playing Bossk, because his abilities are so good when it comes to actually pushing for objectives and everything. When you use this ability, like I mentioned, having the damage reduction, it is going to give you some leeway and some coverage to actually take some damage from your opponents. So most times when I use the star card especially, I know that I can actually go into a room full of clones as an example, as I'm playing on Galactic Assault, and I'll actually be able to actually do some damage to them, and I will receive some damage here and there, but having this damage reduction really helps out to keep me alive, especially when I'm in thick scenarios and thick cases and everything. And one good thing as well about Bossk's middle ability is that when you use it, it actually allows you to get thermal vision. And what this does is it actually reveals enemies that are on the map for you within a radius of your ability. So let's just say as an example that you're trying to find where the enemies are and you want to know what your next play should be. When you use the middle ability, you get the thermal vision, and it actually shows you where all the enemies are on the map that are within a radius of this ability's reach. So it's actually really good, because let's just say you're pushing for an objective and you use his middle ability. Now you have damage reduction, and you're also able to shoot out micro grenades, which are actually really good. And I highly recommend when using the micro grenades as well, when you use this ability, I'd highly recommend jumping. What I see a lot of new players do whenever they play Bossk, they always like stay stationary on the floor. And don't get me wrong, you can actually do that, but in more cases, as a blaster character, I'd highly recommend jumping when using Bossk's middle ability, because he actually can do so. You don't need to stay stationary when using this ability. You can actually jump up into the air, and then you can actually use this ability, shoot those micro grenades at your opponent's feet, and in most cases it'll actually do really good damage to them as well, and in most cases it'll actually allow you to clear out the rooms as fast as possible. Because let's just say that you're going up against a bunch of clones as an example, and you're staying still, it's going to be very easy for your opponents to actually hit you. But when you're jumping up and you're shooting these grenades and everything, especially at their feet, you're going to be doing damage to them, and it's going to be much harder for your opponents to hit you. And having damage reduction, like I mentioned, in most cases you're going to be going up against opponents all the time. So just a little tip for you guys as well when playing Bossk, because I do see a lot of new players who play Bossk and they don't necessarily jump with Bossk, and you can kind of tell that they are newer players as well. So just to kind of help out you guys' experience, I'd highly recommend using this ability, and then when you're pushing for objectives, also jump and then just aim the gun at your opponent's feet so that I can do splash damage to your other opponents as well. And the final star card I use is called Ultimate Predator. And the reason why I use the star card is because it actually benefits Bossk's middle ability. So when you use Bossk's middle ability, it actually gives micro grenades, as I touched on earlier, and also what this does is that it actually allows you to get a 30% increase to the duration of this ability for each enemy kill. So let's just say as an example, you're pushing for an objective and you actually manage to pull this ability out and you gain kills. You're racking up those kills really nicely. 2, 3, 4, 5 kills are coming along really nicely when you're using the grenades. Every time you kill someone, the ability is actually just going to increase for the duration of how many kills you get. This is so good. As an example, let's just say you're playing on the blue as I'm doing right now. You're in that throne room, you're pushing those enemies back, and these enemies, they just keep rushing at you, they just keep coming from all doors. Well, if you have this ability out and you also have the star code running, then in most cases, for every kill that you get, it's just going to increase the duration of your middle ability. So you'll be able to almost have unlimited grenades in a way, which is actually so good, because Bossk's grenades, they do really good damage, and in most cases, like I mentioned, always trying to aim at their feet. In most cases, you'll actually defeat your opponent maybe in 1 or 2 hits from your grenades, depending on how low or high their HP is. So when it comes to actually pushing for the objectives and everything, in my personal opinion, I feel like Bossk is made to be an offensive character, and that's the way that I try to play him. Whenever I use his abilities, I always try to make sure that I am pushing as far up as I possibly can. Most scenarios, you can just throw down your Deoxys grenade so that you can actually do damage to your opponents over time, as they are going to be damaged from actually standing within the gas mines. And also at the same time, you can also be using your middle ability so that you can get thermal instinct, so that you can actually see where your opponents are, so that this this actually allows you to know what your next play is. So in most cases, I'd highly recommend whenever using these abilities, always try to use them to the max of their potential. If you're going for an objective as an example, maybe you want to throw in the mines first, just to like create a safe distance for yourself right there in that specific scenario. If enemies are quite foolish enough to actually run up on you, they'll actually be killed by the mines. Or you can actually start off with throwing out his Deoxys grenade, which does damage over time as it's a gassy effect, and he actually leaves them standing in there and they actually receive damage as well. So in most cases, you can just put this ability down and then just use it, and then you can just follow up with your middle ability so that you can shoot out these grenades. And like I was talking about earlier as well, jumping with Bossk is really essential to keeping you alive as much as possible. You want to give your opponents a hard time to actually defeat you. You don't want to give them an easy opportunity to just get rid of you. So always try to make yourself as hard as a target as possible. Most cases when you're going up against saber wielders, what I tend to do sometimes in most cases, I'd put the mines down because saber wielders have no choice other than to actually come at me. And then what you can do, I can put the mines down, and then I can maybe throw out the Deoxys grenade, and then I can actually follow up with my middle ability so I can get those grenades when the opponents are actually coming at me and they're slashing at me with their sabers and everything. What I can then do is I can then roll, and one thing with Bossk as well, I'd highly recommend timing those rolls. It does take some practice to get the rolls down, but when you time those rolls, you can then roll out, then you throw some grenades down at their feet and everything, do damage to them, or you can actually just try to like get as much of their HP down as much as possible. So just a few tips as well whenever playing with Bossk. So Bossk's rifle, not a lot of people actually know this, especially newer players. You actually can charge up the rifle, as you guys are seeing me do right now. So all you do is you just hold down the left trigger and it takes you to the zoom animation, and you can charge it up all the way up to the max. This actually one-shots most classes other than the heavy, if the heavy is overcharged or overhealed, as you may say. In most cases, it's so satisfying to just line up those shots and actually do damage to your opponents as well, and you actually pick off some really nice kills. So you just charge it up all the way and then you actually shoot it. Try to aim for their heads, as those headshots will be really satisfying. And what not a lot of people actually know as well is that you can actually double zoom with Bossk's rifle. So let's just say you're zooming in and you're trying to go at an opponent, but they're quite a distance away from you. All you have to do is just press the analog stick, and then it will actually do a double zoom, and this will actually allow you to see your opponent much closer, even though they're still a distance away from you. So just a little tip for you guys as well, because sometimes what I see a lot of Bossk players do, especially newer players, is they will just shoot with Bossk's blaster. And don't get me wrong, you can do some damage with this blaster, but this blaster actually does the most damage when you actually fully charge it and then use those hits. Most cases, if your opponent is low, then I wouldn't recommend fully charging, as it just gives your opponent time to actually plan a next escape maybe, or maybe they want to run away from you, or you can actually finish them off, don't get me wrong, but at the same time it's also really good to just stay in there, use this ability, actually charge up your rifle, and then most cases you'll actually one-shot them. And it's really satisfying. Like I mentioned, seeing those sniper kills from Bossk is really good. So just a little tip for you guys, like I mentioned, I don't see a lot of Bossk players, especially newer players as well, I don't think they know about Bossk's ability when it comes to using his gun, so that he can actually double zoom, and also when it comes to using his rifle, that you can actually zoom and charge it up all the way as well. So Bossk, like I mentioned, he does have star cards that actually benefit his Deoxys grenade as well, and you can go for that route if you wanted to as well, and it's completely understandable if you'd want to. Some of his star cards, they actually extend the duration of his Deoxys grenade. They actually allow you to actually heal yourself whenever you're standing within your own Deoxys grenade, and they also give you a added effect as it actually stays longer, and the smoke is also thicker as well, which is pretty good. Most scenarios whenever I play Bossk, I actually like to throw down his Deoxys grenade, do damage to my opponents, because most times whenever you throw this down, your opponents are going to want to retreat for a duration of time, because they're going to make sure that their HP is as high as possible. So most times before I start up an attack, I like to throw down my Deoxys grenade, make sure that it's in within a range of my opponents so that I can do damage to them, and then I'd possibly follow up with my micro grenades and then try to push them off the objective, or try to push forward if I possibly can as well. So just another tip for you guys, just in case you did want to go down that route as well. And another thing about Bossk as well, which makes him so good as well, is that when it comes to his HP, so Bossk has a flat 600 HP. However, Bossk is the only character on the dark side that can actually regenerate his health back to full without getting kills. Leia, she can do the same on the light side, that she can just put a squad shield down and then she can regenerate her health. Bossk, he can actually regenerate his health all the way down from 1 straight back up to 600. All you need to do is just take a little bit of time and actually just stay within a safe zone, and this will actually allow you to regenerate your health back to full. So in most cases, as an example, let's just say that your HP is running low, maybe you're down to just 1 health or maybe 2 health or anything like that. Just create some distance from yourself and your opponents, and then you'll actually be able to regenerate your health back to full in a matter of seconds, which is really good as well in regards to keeping you in the fight and also staying alive as Bossk as well. So I hope that this hero guide has actually helped you guys to understand how to play Bossk a little bit better, and also the star cards that I use, I hope that they actually give you guys a good experience with playing Bossk as well. As like I mentioned, Bossk playing a blaster character, he can go down very quickly, as I do find that Bossk is at his max potential when he has all of his abilities on. When he doesn't, he kind of struggles a lot, especially against saber wielders. Most times when you roll with Bossk, it's just going to give your opponents an opportunity to actually do damage to you. However, when you have your abilities up, whether it's your mines or your deoxys grenade or also your micro grenades, you'll be able to actually do damage to your opponents and actually get some really good kills as well. I highly recommend when you play Bossk, you play Bossk aggressively, because you always want to make sure that you're in your opponent's faces and you're doing damage to them. Whether you're doing damage to them using his deoxys grenade or you're actually using his middle ability so that you can get the micro grenades, I highly recommend playing him aggressively, or I'd say semi-aggressively, just enough so that you're actually able to push for objectives and also keep your opponents back. Because a lot of times whenever you're playing as Bossk, especially what I see for new players, let's just say as an example on Naboo on the throne room, most Bossk players I've seen at least, they would actually just stay back with Bossk, they would just throw his deoxys grenade and they'd rack up a few kills, don't get me wrong, but they're not really actually helping the team to actually push for the actual throne room. Because in most scenarios, let's just say that if you're just staying back, you're just throwing your deoxys grenade, but you're staying a distance away from your opponents, you actually have two abilities, one being his mines and one being his micro grenades, that you can actually use to ensure that you're keeping your opponents back as much as possible. So I just want to make sure and also enhance everyone's experience when they're playing as Bossk, and I find that these star cards that I run, they actually allow you to do so. So if you have enjoyed this video, do drop a like on it guys, that's much appreciated, and I hope that you guys have enjoyed this video, and I hope to see more Bossk players playing on different game modes like Supremacy, Galactic Assault, and also Heroes versus Villains as well. More scenarios, like I mentioned, Bossk is a very underrated character. Bossk is really strong, and especially in the right hand, especially if you're coming up against a player who knows how to play Bossk. They know when to roll, they know when to throw down their mines, they know when to use their abilities. That Bossk player will definitely help your team out in a lot of scenarios. However, if you don't actually know what his abilities do and you don't know what star cards to actually use for him, you're going to kind of struggle, and obviously you're just going to be wasting the opportunity to actually help your team. So I really hope that this hero guide has actually helped you guys in a lot of scenarios, understand his abilities, what Bossk can do, and also how to maximize his full potential as well. So if you're new to the channel guys, do hit that subscribe button as well. Do drop a like on the video guys if you've enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in the next hero guide. Take care everyone.